Overnight, the U.S. decided to double all tariffs on Chinese imports. Yesterday, Trump took to Truth Social and dropped a bombshell. Starting November 1st, the United States will impose an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods. And it's not just your phone. We're talking about laptops, TVs, toys, clothes, and thousands of other products you buy every single day. But here's what the mainstream media isn't telling you. This could reshape the entire global economy for the next decade. We're not just talking about expensive iPhones. We're talking about the potential collapse of supply chains that took 40 years to build, the rise of new economic superpowers, and possibly the end of globalization as we know it. Now here's the key word: additional. China already faces 30% tariffs from earlier rounds of trade disputes. This new 100% tariff stacks on top of that existing 30%. We're potentially looking at 130% total tariffs on Chinese imports. But what triggered this nuclear option? China threw the first punch. According to Trump's statement, China sent what he called an extremely hostile letter to the world, announcing severe new restrictions on rare earth exports, materials that are absolutely critical for manufacturing everything from smartphones to military equipment to electric vehicles. Rare earths are the hidden ingredients in modern technology, and China controls about 60% of global production. They're essentially holding the tech supply chain hostage. Trump's response? If you're going to weaponize trade, so will we. And he canceled his planned meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The gloves are officially off. But let me tell you something most people don't realize about rare earths. These aren't just obscure minerals. Every single wind turbine needs hundreds of pounds of rare earth magnets. Every EV requires about 10 pounds. Your smartphone has at least 16 different rare earth elements in it right now. Without them, the entire green energy revolution grinds to a halt. And here's the scary part. We used to mine these in America, but China flooded the market with cheap rare earths in the 1990s and 2000s, driving American mining operations out of business. Now we're dependent on them. That's what Trump means when he says America has been played. But here's where this gets really interesting and dangerous. This isn't just an economic fight. It's a chess match between two superpowers, and the stakes are enormous. On one side, you have Trump arguing that America has been played for decades, that China has stolen intellectual property, manipulated currency, and built their economy on the backs of American consumers. His strategy? Hit them so hard economically that they're forced to negotiate on America's terms. On the other side, China isn't backing down. They've survived trade wars before. They have 1.4 billion domestic consumers and growing markets across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They're betting they can weather this storm longer than American consumers can tolerate higher prices. And here's the kicker. Both sides might be wrong. Economic historians point to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which raised tariffs and contributed to deepening the Great Depression. When everyone retaliates, everyone loses. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. But wait, didn't Trump already try tariffs in his first term? What happened then? Great point. Let me give you the history lesson the media won't. During Trump's first presidency, he imposed tariffs on about $360 billion worth of Chinese goods. Studies showed that American consumers and businesses bore most of the cost, about $40 billion per year in additional costs. But here's what's different this time. These tariffs are way bigger, and they're happening at a time when inflation is already a problem. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. The other difference, China's economy is weaker now than it was in 2018. They're dealing with a real estate crisis, youth unemployment over 20%, and slower growth. Trump thinks this is the perfect time to strike because China is vulnerable. But wounded animals are often the most dangerous. But wait, there's more. Trump didn't just announce tariffs. He also announced export controls on any and all critical software starting November 1st. This means American tech companies could be banned from selling crucial software to China. We're talking about everything from AI platforms to cloud computing services to semiconductor design tools. This is technological warfare. If China can't access American software, their tech industry gets kneecapped. But American tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Nvidia also lose access to their second-largest market.
Here is why this software ban might actually be more significant than the tariffs themselves. China has been racing to develop its own tech ecosystem for years, their own chips, AI, and operating systems. But they're still years behind American technology in crucial areas. Cutting them off from American software is like trying to force them to run a marathon with a broken leg. It will severely hamper their tech development. But here's the double-edged sword. American tech companies make billions from the Chinese market. Apple gets about 20% of its revenue from China. Nvidia has been making a fortune selling AI chips there. If those revenue streams dry up, it hurts American workers, shareholders, and innovation funding. Plus, when you force China to develop their own alternatives, you're essentially creating a competitor. In 5 or 10 years, they might have their own versions of these technologies that they can sell to the rest of the world, cutting American companies out of global markets entirely. Who really wins? Now here's where it gets fascinating. While the US and China are locked in this battle, there are other countries rubbing their hands together with glee. Vietnam is about to become the biggest winner. Companies have already been shifting manufacturing from China to Vietnam over the past 5 years. This tariff announcement, it's like someone just hit the fast forward button. Expect massive investments in Vietnamese factories, infrastructure, and shipping ports. India is positioning itself as the next manufacturing hub. They've got a huge workforce, improving infrastructure, and a government that's rolling out the red carpet for foreign companies. Apple is already making iPhones there. This could accelerate India's rise as an economic superpower. Mexico benefits from its proximity to the US and the USMCA trade agreement. Nearshoring is the new buzzword, bringing manufacturing closer to home. Expect to see more Hecho in Mexico labels on your products. But here's the uncomfortable truth. All of these countries have higher labor costs than China. So even if companies move production, your costs are still going up. It's just a question of whether prices rise 50% or 100%. And let's talk about the elephant in the room that nobody wants to discuss: American manufacturing. Trump's bet is that these tariffs will force companies to bring manufacturing back to America, create jobs, rebuild the middle class, make America great again. You know the slogan. But here's the reality check. An American factory worker makes about $25 to $35 per hour with benefits. A Chinese factory worker makes about $3 to $5 per hour. Even with tariffs, the math is brutal. Unless we're willing to accept much higher prices for American-made goods, mass manufacturing isn't coming back. That said, some high-tech automated manufacturing could return. Factories run by robots don't care about wage differences, but robots also don't create the millions of middle-class jobs that disappeared when manufacturing left in the first place. It's a complicated picture, and anyone who tells you this is simple is either lying or doesn't understand economics. Let's zoom out even further, because this isn't just a US-China problem anymore. This could trigger a global economic reshuffling. Europe is watching nervously. If the US slaps massive tariffs on China, China might dump its excess products into European markets at discount prices to make up for lost American sales. That could devastate European manufacturers. Or worse, Europe might feel pressured to pick a side. Do they align with America and risk Chinese retaliation? Or do they try to stay neutral and risk American anger? The European Union is already fragile. Brexit proved that. This could create new fractures. Then there's the currency war nobody's talking about yet. When tariffs hit, China could devalue its currency to make its exports cheaper, partially offsetting the tariff impact. But currency manipulation triggers inflation, destroys savings, and creates economic chaos. It's a dangerous game. And let's not forget about the debt situation. China holds over $800 billion in US Treasury bonds. That's leverage. They could start dumping those bonds, which would spike American interest rates and make it more expensive for the US government to borrow money. That means higher mortgage rates, car loan rates, and credit card rates for you. This is why economists are terrified. It's not just about tariffs. It's about all the ways this situation can spiral out of control. Here's a scenario that keeps financial analysts up at night. China retaliates by restricting exports of more critical materials. America escalates with even higher tariffs. Other countries choose sides. Global supply chains collapse. we enter a recession that looks mild compared to 2008. Am I being dramatic? Maybe. But these are the kinds of cascading effects that can happen when the world's two largest economies go to war. All right, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about what you can actually do to prepare and protect yourself. Short-term moves before November 1st. First, if you're planning any major purchases, electronics, appliances, furniture, do it now. Seriously, stop watching this video and go buy that laptop you've been thinking about. I'm kidding, finish the video first, but you get the point. Second, check your investment portfolio. If you're heavily invested in companies with major Chinese exposure, like Apple, Nike, or Tesla, understand that you're about to experience some volatility. I'm not saying sell everything, but be aware and maybe diversify. Third, if you run a business that imports from China, talk to your suppliers now about alternatives or stockpiling inventory. November 1st is coming fast. Medium-term strategy. Start looking for products made in other countries or the US. Yes, they might cost more even now, but the price gap is about to narrow significantly. Get ahead of the curve. Build an emergency fund if you don't have one. Economic uncertainty means job uncertainty. Having 3 to 6 months of expenses saved can be the difference between weathering the storm and drowning in it. Consider learning skills that are valuable in a reshoring economy. Advanced manufacturing, automation, supply chain management. These could be hot career fields if manufacturing does start returning to the US. Long-term thinking. Here's the big picture. We're witnessing the potential end of the globalization era that defined the last 30 years. That doesn't mean trade stops, but it means trade patterns are fundamentally changing. The winners in the next decade will be people and companies that are adaptable, diversified, and not dependent on any single country for their income or supply chain. Think about your career, your investments, your business through that lens. Are you too dependent on the old globalized system? How can you adapt to a more regionalized, friend-shoring economy? This isn't financial advice, I'm not a financial advisor, but these are the questions smart people are asking themselves right now. So what happens now? November 1st is the deadline. That gives both sides about 3 weeks to either negotiate a deal or prepare for economic pain. Here are the 3 possible scenarios. Scenario 1, last-minute negotiations. Trump uses the threat as leverage, China makes concessions on rare earths, and a deal gets struck. Tariffs get reduced or delayed. This is the Trump art of the deal playbook. Threaten big, negotiate down, claim victory. The probability? I'd say 30%. Why so low? Because Xi Jinping can't look weak domestically, and Trump has already canceled their meeting. That's not how you set up for a productive negotiations. Scenario 2, both sides dig in. November 1st comes, tariffs hit, prices spike, and we enter a full-blown trade war that could trigger a global recession. Stock markets crash, unemployment rises, political chaos follows. The probability? Maybe 20%. It's the worst-case scenario, and usually both sides find a way to avoid mutual destruction. But Trump is unpredictable, and China has shown they're willing to endure pain for long-term strategic goals. Scenario 3, partial compromise. Some tariffs go into effect, but at reduced levels with ongoing negotiations. Pain, but manageable pain. Maybe tariffs hit 50% instead of 100%. Maybe they apply to some product categories, but not others. Maybe they get delayed a few months. The probability? 50%. This is usually what happens in trade disputes. Nobody gets everything they want, nobody loses face completely, and the can gets kicked down the road while negotiations continue. Most economists are betting on scenario 3, but Trump is unpredictable, and Xi Jinping has his own political pressures at home. There's also a hidden scenario 4 that nobody's really talking about. China could try to wait Trump out. If they think he might lose the next election or change his policy, they might be willing to endure short-term pain for long-term gain. That would mean a prolonged economic Cold War with no clear resolution. But let me ask you a deeper question that goes beyond just these tariffs. What is the economy actually for? Is it to give us the cheapest possible prices on everything, even if that means we lose our manufacturing base and become dependent on potential adversaries? Or is the economy supposed to provide good jobs for citizens, even if that means we pay more for products? This is the fundamental debate, and there's no easy answer. The pro-globalization argument says cheap goods raise everyone's standard of living. A single mom working minimum wage can afford a TV, a smartphone, and clothes for her kids. Because of cheap Chinese manufacturing, that matters. Globalization also reduces the risk of war. Countries that trade together don't usually shoot at each other. The anti-globalization argument says, what good are cheap products if you don't have a job to buy them with? Entire American communities were destroyed when factories closed, undressed on the spot and changed into cheap Chinese-made ones. Drug addiction, suicide rates, and social collapse followed. And depending on China for critical goods is a national security nightmare.